So how exactly does someone square a square without a square? Square? When I first got started in hand tool woodworking, I made a square, and then a little while later I bought another square. And I didn't know, is this square that I just purchased actually square? How do you know it without having another square to check it against? And do you trust that original square? So how do you actually know that your square is square and ready to use? And until you know that, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle. So even if you make your own, how do you know at what angle to put this? And how do you know where to lay it out? I kind of want to dive into that today. It's kind of one of those basic topics that a lot of people don't know about. And it's very simple to actually check if your square is square. But then number two, once you find out that it is not true, it's not square anymore, how do you fix a square so that you can bring it back into a perfect square trueness? Let's take a look. So I picked up this square at an estate sale a while ago, and you can see someone spray painted it. But it's a really nice looking square. Just it's seen better days, and I don't know if it is actually square. As a matter of fact, I know it's not square because I've tested it beforehand. But the easiest way to do is to take a square that you know and you trust, and you put it on there and you test it, and you find out that it's touching here, but leaving a hair of a gap here. I don't like that. But if you don't have a square, how do you test it? Now I have this piece of plywood, and this is one of the great uses for plywood because it doesn't warp, it doesn't bend, so it stays secure over time. And I've jointed this edge here. So I've taken my jointer plane and I've jointed this. I know this edge is perfectly flat. That's the important thing. You have to have a perfectly flat edge. I don't care about anything else as long as I have a perfectly flat edge. And I'm going to set this on here, and I'm going to keep this tight. I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to strike a line. And then I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to keep this tight here. And then I'm going to put my knife in the marking gauge line that I just created and slide this up to it. And then I'm going to check down here and see if I'm still on that line. And here I'm not. I'm off about 1/16 of an inch. I don't know if you guys can see that. But yeah, I'm off about 1/16 of an inch. So that means that this whole beam is twisted in a little less than a half of a 1/16, so a 32nd. And then I could also do the exact same thing on the inside of the beam here. I can put this on, and I can draw a line with the inside of the beam. I can flip it over, and I can line it up. Actually, here, I'm going to line it up here, pull it back, and I've got that same 1/16 of an inch gap down here. So it's off the line by about 1/16 of an inch. So I've got about a 32nd of an inch that I need to take off this side here, and about a 32nd of an inch I need to take off this side here, tapering down to nothing, and then tapering down to nothing. So you know that it's not true. You know how far out of a square it is. How do you fix it? And that's one thing that I had a problem with when I first got started. There aren't very many videos actually talking about how do you fix the square and make it true so that you can work with it. Now, with contractor squares, one of the common ways is to bend it. But that doesn't work with this because you have a wooden beam and you have pins going through it, and you're probably going to be wearing out those pins and loosening this. And if it's loose, then it's trash. You have to throw it away. There's no way you can ever make it square again. So what we actually want to do is take off material off of this edge, because I want to take off material here to nothing out here, and I want to take off material here to nothing in here. So let's take a look at how we do that. So what I like to do is take the square, put it in my vise, leave it up a little bit, and crank it down. Then I'm going to take a file, flat file, and what I basically want to do is start back here. I need to take most of my material off of this heel, and less and less and less all the other side. So I'm going to start, and a file is meant to be used on the push stroke, not on the pull stroke, so try and pick it up when you pull it back. And I'm going to start back here. I'm just going to do a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit more, and with each stroke I'm going to go a little farther down the beam. So I'm basically taking off a lot of material here and less and less and less material. And you can see how I go all the way along until eventually I get close to the other end. And there I've made several passes, so I've taken off a good amount of material here, less material, and very little, almost nothing on the tip. And doing this, over time you're going to learn how much you need to take off. I know I'm probably going to have to do that process 3 or 4 times to get rid of that 32nd of an inch. So I'm going to do this a couple more times, and then we'll take it back to the plate and test it again. So every now and then I'm going to stop, I'm going to bring it back over here. You can see I have several lines here where I've tested it several times already. And I'm going to create a new line. And I'm going to mark down that. Oop, a little over. And then I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to see how well it lines up to that line. I put it right on the edge of that, and I can see I have that same edge running all the way along, and I have a nice true edge. So now I know that this edge of the plate is 90 degrees to this edge of the face, and I can trust that that is square. The last thing we need to do is we end up with a good burr here on the side, and I just like to get rid of that, so I take another file, and I'll just use that to clean off that burr all the way along and make it fully usable. So now that I've squared up the face to the outside edge, I want to do the exact same thing to the inside edge. And so again, it's just the same process of going back and forth and finding out how far off you are. Now, because I know this last line that I drew was perfectly square, what I can also do is just bring this over and check it against that line. And rather than having to redraw a line on this, I can check it against this line that I know is perfectly square. And then once I get it perfectly square, I'll draw its own line and check it. So let's take this over and file it down. So just as before, I'm going to grab the file, start back here, a little bit of a pass, a little more of a pass. Each time going a little farther, and a little farther, and a little farther, until we get all the way down to the end. And then do it again. So you can start to see the whole process again. Exact same thing, just more fun. So now after a few more tests, we can bring this one over here. We can clamp it down, run a line. Then we can flip it over and check the line. And if I put this on here, and I put this on here, we're dead on. There's a line running all the way down. And so now I know that this square, both of these sides are perfectly square to this face, and I'm good to go. So I think the last thing I need to do is just clean up this, just like I did the other side. And voila! Though this square is not pretty, it is very functional, and now it is perfectly square, and I know I can trust this. So if I hold this square up to it, I know that it's going to touch all the way along right at the right time. Just like that. So, there. That's how you can use a simple jointed edge to square up a square, and then actually use files to actually square the square. So I hope that was helpful to you. There you go. So even if you don't have a square, it is your first square. Even if it's a store-bought square, still check it. You never quite know. Especially with combination squares. Some of the cheaper ones tend to be a little sloppy. Even some of the expensive ones tend to be off from time to time. So it's always worth checking your squares every now and then, especially if it drops off the bench. Check it, see if it's right, and then you can go about fixing it. Now you know how to. It's a very simple process, and can leave you with a tool that you can use for the rest of your life. I do want to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon. You guys are the reason why I can keep putting out videos all the time and not do any sponsored ads. So this is information straight from me to you without any company getting in the way. So I want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to find out more about Patreon or help out with that, you can do so right down here. Also, if you'd like to subscribe, you can do that. I do have a podcast with 2 of my friends where we talk all things woodworking once a week on Thursday mornings. You can find that out right over here. And until next time, have a wonderful day.